Breeze on 3rd and 1. Ends a wide open touchdown, Saints. It's Michael Thomas in for Randall. Breeze. Michael Thomas with a first down, and he's running with the football down to the 43 of Cleveland. The field spread for Breeze. He's going to Thomas, and he's got it. It's going to be first and goal, Saints. Michael Thomas, touchdown, Saints.
Yes, that's right, folks. This is podcast number 2 of the day. And as always, I thank you folks for listening. And in case you didn't notice, that was Mr. Michael Thomas, who just signed the most lucrative contract ever for an NFL wide receiver, as he and the Saints agreed on a 5-year, $100 million pact. And that extension also includes $61 million in guarantees, per Ian Rapoport of NFL Insider, and always the most reputable reporter out there. And if you want any NFL news, look to him. Follow him on Twitter. And Michael Thomas was sitting out of Saints training camp. Similar to the Ezekiel Elliott situation, Ezekiel Elliott wants a record-breaking deal for running backs. And Michael Thomas wanted to reset the market for wide receivers, and he just did. And in case any of us forgot, Michael Thomas has done a little more than be a typical run-of-the-mill second-round pick who might make a bit of an impact. This is a guy who has broken the record for receptions in his first 3 seasons. Because in his first 3 seasons, he's caught 321 passes to go with 3,787 yards and 23 touchdowns. And this includes last year when Michael Thomas caught 85% of his targets, catching 125 of 147, and he generated 75 receiving first downs, 3rd most in football. And also, since being drafted in 2016, Michael Thomas has more receptions than any other player in the NFL. So, to say that he's a little important to the team, I guess would be a bit of an understatement, but he absolutely deserved to get paid. And looking ahead on Twitter, we saw athletes like LeBron James and Devontae Adams of the Green Bay Packers be very ecstatic for him. And there are a lot of people wondering whether this can reset the market for wide receivers, as previously mentioned. I don't really think it will, simply because Michael Thomas, you could argue, is the best receiver in football right now. Or, at worst, has the best hands of any receiver in football. So this isn't going to change the market for the majority of wide receivers because, well, the majority of wide receivers are simply not as valuable as Michael Thomas. And we look back in retrospect at Drew Brees' career, and Michael Thomas is the first Pro Bowl receiver Drew Brees has ever had. He's had guys like Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham and Lance Moore, and even Marcus Colston, who was great as he was, never even made a Pro Bowl. But he's been Drew Brees' security blanket for the past 3 seasons, and he absolutely deserved to get paid. And going beyond that, we've been taking a closer look around training camp. And as we know, the Ezekiel Elliott situation with the Cowboys is more than fluid to this point, as the Cowboys have signed Alfred Morris in lieu of Ezekiel Elliott's absenteeism. And even delving further into that situation, yesterday it was reported that a lawsuit had been filed against the Dallas Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott for allegedly covering up a 2017 car crash with the help of local police so the running back wouldn't miss the playoff game between the Green Bay Packers. And the plaintiff, Ronnie Hill, has claimed that the Cowboys, quote, conspired with the Frisco Police Department to cover up the severity of the accident to assure that Elliott's health would not be placed in question before their playoff game, end quote. And the crash occurred 4 days before their playoff game against the Packers, which was a 34-31 Packers win. And Mr. Hill is seeking $20 million in damages, as he claims that Ezekiel Elliott was at fault for the crash, and claims that he went right through a red light and then collided with his BMW 750, causing more than $33,000 in damages to the vehicle, and a tow truck had to pull the two vehicles apart. And as we know with Ezekiel Elliott, this is not exactly a model citizen, as he was suspended for the first 6 games of the 2017 season for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy, and his suspension came from accusations of domestic violence against his ex-girlfriend on multiple occasions during 2016. And he was never criminally charged for it, mind you, but the league still suspended him. And so, this is clearly someone who's proven to be a liability off the field for the Cowboys. And he's obviously not the first. There was the Tyreek Hill situation either. But this man has a history of just doing, I don't want to say inhumane, but just idiotic things that draw negative attention to him and to the team. And there have been people who have said, oh, well, you don't need a running back to win titles. And that may or may not be true. But can you name any other running back in the league who can do the things Ezekiel Elliott can do? Le'Veon Bell? Maybe David Johnson, if healthy. And so, his history, Ezekiel Elliott's history of personal conduct and his off-field behavior has been disturbing. It's been unsettling. But the Cowboys need this man. Dak Prescott, I don't think anyone is still convinced that he can thrive without Ezekiel Elliott. And now he has Amari Cooper, a legitimate downfield threat. And we'll see what kind of contract the Cowboys offer him. Elliott wants to up the market for running backs, as many believe Michael Thomas did for wide receivers. But we'll see what becomes of that situation. But we venture around to other parts of the NFL, and A.J. Green of the Cincinnati Bengals will miss multiple games, and he's had injury problems of late in more recent seasons, and that's just a shame because this is someone who has had one of the best starts to a career any wide receiver has ever had. He's been to the Pro Bowl in all but one season of his career. And in his first 8 seasons, A.J. Green amassed 8,213 yards, averaged 14.8 yards per reception, had 57 touchdowns, and played in 102 games. But in 2016, he played in only 10 games. And last year, played in only 9. But still averaged 77 yards per game. And without A.J. Green, that means defensive coordinators will draw more coverage over to John Ross. And of course, they'll load the box to stop Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. And they'll also be looking to add an additional nickel corner or so to compensate for Tyler Boyd, who was also just given a nice extension by the Bengals as well. But he is expected to miss multiple games. And keep in mind, A.J. Green is also in the final year of his deal, and he's still owed $12 million, or very close to that, in base salary. And as we have just learned, courtesy of ESPN, former Miami Dolphins and Hall of Fame linebacker Nick Buoniconti has just died at age 78. And he, of course, was a member of the no-name defense that got the Dolphins to 2 straight Super Bowl wins, including their undefeated 1972 season, in which the Dolphins finished 14-0, and is still considered by many fans and pundits to be the greatest football team ever put together. And Buoniconti was an 8-time Pro Bowler, over the course of 14 NFL seasons, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame 18 years ago. And he said in November of 2017 that he would donate his brain for CTE research, and he revealed in May of the same year that he was suffering from memory loss, could not use his left hand, and he struggled to put on a shirt. And it's just a very tragic loss for a man who is beloved in the Miami area and among NFL lore. An all-time great. And he was a very successful broadcaster as well upon his retirement from the league. But we send our condolences to his family and to those close to him. And between him and Bart Starr, the NFL has lost some legendary players of late. Players who built this league from the ground up and made the NFL into the empire that it is today. And it's just unfortunate that a lot of these older NFL stars, they're reaching their old ages and they're suffering from injuries that stemmed from their long playing careers back when player safety was merely an afterthought, and now it's accentuated more today than ever, thankfully so. But the sacrifices of these players gave us the football that we have today. And we should be grateful for that, because without them, we don't get the NFL in its current state, where it has more fans than ever, where it's more profitable than ever, and where it has more exposure than ever. So we send our thoughts and prayers to his family and to those around him. And folks, that's all we have time for on this podcast. And as always, I thank you all for watching. And we'll be scrutinizing the Major League Baseball trade deadline with you. And more buzz around NFL training camps as well. And as always, thank you all for listening. This is Tim Sullivan signing off from the Quadruple Play podcast.